snap. The kick is in the air, and the kick this time is no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. Final score, Tennessee 20, Florida 17. Pandemonium reigns.
You're listening to the RTI Podcast, powered by RockyTopInsider.com.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Podcast. We have a ton to cover, so let's just get right into it. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, joined by Ben McKee, our staff writer. And Ben, it has been a really busy Wednesday. Actually, been kind of a busy week overall for Tennessee athletics, but Wednesday specifically, we've got transfer news. We've got really, I guess, good news for Tennessee all around, except for one guy transferring out, as he announced on Tuesday. Then you have Trey Smith making an announcement on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Let's start with kind of the big news first here, the one that's, I guess, most recent as we're recording this right now, and that is Georgia offensive lineman, former 5-star local Knoxville product, former top 30 overall recruit, Cade Mays is not only in the transfer portal, but according to multiple reports now, I think ESPN was the first one to report it, it looks like Cade's not only going to be transferred from Georgia, but he's going to be coming back home to Knoxville. Barring, I think, as I saw, I think 247 Sports reported it, according to their sources, barring any unforeseen circumstances or anything like that, it looks like you're going to see Cade Mays join his younger brother at Tennessee, which that's interesting as itself. But the thought is that maybe if Cade does come to Tennessee, he's going to have to sit out a year. But now, as we're recording this, Ben, as we just caught each other and on the call here, there is a tweet from, I think his name's Rady Nabusil. I'm not sure he says his last name, but he is a publisher at UGAsports.com, which is the rival site that covers Georgia football. He's reporting that Cade Mays' father, Kevin, who played at Tennessee as well, had part of his pinky finger amputated at a UGA athletic event when the folding chair he was in got wedged against a column. Sam Pittman, the former offensive line coach at Georgia, now Arkansas head coach, put the finger on ice. The Mays family apparently are suing UGA and the chair manufacturer, it appears, as well. So, Ben, this is I don't know where to go with this. It's huge news if Cade Mays comes to Tennessee, and it looks like he's going to. It's huge news if that happens, regardless of what his eligibility will be. But if he comes into Tennessee and is able to start immediately, able to play immediately, and we'll touch on the Trey Smith stuff here in a second, but that gives Tennessee a bona fide starter, because Cade Mays was a full-time starter for Georgia this past season as a sophomore. He was a starter for he started at several games for Georgia as a freshman. I think he was a freshman All-SEC player as well. But Ben, this is huge news coming out of just not even a week after Tennessee finished up the 2019 season with a thrilling victory over Indiana in the Taxslayer Gator Bowl.
Yeah, and Cade Mays, assuming that he can receive a waiver to play immediately, which that is possible, that he receive a waiver to play immediately, considering Sam Pittman, Georgia's offensive line coach, Cade Mays' offensive line coach there at Georgia. He took the Arkansas head coaching job. So, and I think it looks like there have been several offensive linemen commit to the coach and not Georgia, and the coach being Sam Pittman. So I wonder, and I feel positive about Cade Mays potentially receiving a waiver to play immediately next year, assuming that the reports from ESPN, from multiple people, from Austin Price of VolQuest.com, assuming those reports are true, I like Tennessee's chances of Cade becoming immediately eligible, and that's huge news, because Tennessee's offensive line, although it progressed this season according to Pro Football Focus, it was still one of the I don't want to say it was one of the worst, but statistically, I guess statistically it was one of the worst. Watching it with the eyeballs, it didn't look like one of the worst in the entire country, but it was an offensive line that continued to get better and better and better, and it was definitely a huge improvement from last season, year one under Jeremy Pruitt, to year two under Jeremy Pruitt and Will Friend. You add Jim Chaney, and now you add Cade Mays to an offensive line that is absolutely better than it was a year ago, that has a ton of talent. I like Tennessee's chances of Trey Smith returning to school for his senior season. So if that were to happen, you have Wanye Morris at left tackle, Trey Smith at left guard, Brandon Kennedy at center, Cade Mays probably slides in at right guard, and then you have Darnell Wright at right tackle. That is a daggum good starting five offensive line. And really, Cade Mays can play anywhere along the offensive line. As a freshman at Georgia, played in 11 of 14 games, was named to the coach's All-SEC freshman team that year. And then this past season, the season that just wrapped up, his sophomore year, started 6 games at right guard, 2 at right tackle, 2 at left guard, and 1 at left tackle. So he is a guy that probably slides in at right guard just because that is the open spot along the offensive line. But he's a guy that can play anywhere. You can slide him around, and he was probably going to be Georgia's starting left tackle this upcoming season, and a legitimate NFL prospect that's round 1, round 2, round 3 worthy at that tackle position. So if Wanye Morris, if Darnell Wright, if they take a step back, you could slide him in at the tackle position. If Trey Smith does not come back to school, then you can slide him in at left guard. If Brandon Kennedy, who, yes, he was injury-free this season, but he is injury-prone throughout his career. If he suffers another injury, you could slide him in at center potentially. Obviously, there's the vacant right guard position, but Tennessee has many options. I mentioned the starting 5, but you also have K'Ron Calvert. You have Jerome Carvin. I like those 2 offensive linemen. But all of a sudden you have 7, 8, 9 offensive linemen that you can really trust and really play. So a great addition to the Tennessee Vols roster. It's better than any recruit that Jeremy Pruitt signed this recruiting class. And it's just a tremendous addition because Cade Mays is a tremendous talent.
Yeah, Cade Mays, to me, like you said, he can play kind of anywhere. I think you would slot him in at right guard because, like you said, that's where Tennessee kind of would have a more of an immediate need, and that is where he played the most last season. Like you said, though, he played everywhere last season except for center. He played every other spot except for center as a sophomore for Georgia last year, but he made 6 starts at right guard and then 2 at the other positions aside from center. It can't be, I guess, talked about enough about how big of an addition this would be. And I'd seen, people, you mentioned on Twitter, I think Jason Swain also mentioned on Twitter about some Vol fans still feeling a certain type of way about Cade because of that video he posted, or I guess not he posted, but it got posted of him. And I think also Tanner Antenuti, who was a Tennessee signee, and now he had to medically retire, but making the song and trashing Tennessee and whatever. I get people being upset about that, but this is about winning, and I think this shows to me. I think Cade Mays coming back to Knoxville after he did that, I think to me shows a maturity by him. It's not a case of him, if he still felt that way about Tennessee, if he was still feeling the same way he did when that video got posted of him cussing at Tennessee and kind of trashing the Vols, he wouldn't be transferring back here. His brother may not even have been coming to Tennessee. It wouldn't, maybe I don't know if his brother would have or not, but it might have affected what Cooper did in his recruitment. The fact that Cade is coming back to Knoxville, I think, shows a maturity on his part. I think it shows that Tennessee, obviously that wasn't when Jeremy Pruitt was at Tennessee. That was before. I guess technically it's right around the same time, but it was. Cade decommitted from Tennessee before Butch got fired, and then obviously ended up going to Georgia, sticking with them after Pruitt was brought in. They made kind of a push, I think, for him, but he ended up staying with Georgia. But it shows to me that there has been forgiveness, I think, on both sides, maybe forgiveness from Tennessee's part, and like I said, I think maturity from Cade's standpoint and from his family, because his family, not just him, but his family endured a lot. It wasn't just Cade Mays and people throwing a lot of vitriol at him, which I think was stupid for Vol fans to do. I don't think a lot of people did it, or maybe it was a minority when you consider how big of a group the fan base is of Vol Nation. But it was enough to where, it was pretty bad, some of the stuff people were saying to an 18-year-old kid about stuff that he had said in a car on a phone recording. But I think it's been a couple years since then. He's matured. I think it's been enough time for wounds to heal. I think recruiting Cooper Mays has been a part of it and building that relationship back up and really fostering it with Kevin and Cooper and the family, with Jeremy Pruitt and this staff. I think Sam Pittman moving on from Georgia was obviously a huge part of it. And that's why I think that, coupled with that news of Georgia and the Mays family suing Georgia and the chair manufacturer that cost Kevin his finger, I think there's a better than decent chance that Cade Mays ends up getting immediate eligibility. And it would be it's weird because he's transferring within the conference, not even within the conference. He's transferring within divisions, but he is moving closer to home. He's moving back closer to, where his family is here in Knoxville. Like I said, he has the situation where his position coach is no longer at Georgia. That he moved on to take the head coaching position at Arkansas. You have that situation now where the Mays family is suing Georgia. Ben, I'm going to go on record and say, I think if Cade transfers to UT, which it looks like he's going to, I think he gets immediate eligibility.
No, I think he does too. And even if he doesn't, this is still a great move for the future of Tennessee football. But I do think that he receives immediate eligibility. I talked about it a moment ago. The reason he went to Georgia, in my opinion, was because of Sam Pittman. And Sam Pittman is no longer at Georgia. Sam Pittman is now the head coach at Arkansas. So you have that factor. You have the factor that Cade is from Knoxville, played at Knoxville Catholic High School. I'm sure that helps him moving closer to home, literally to home. And then this whole thing with his dad and the finger and suing Georgia, I don't know how or in what way, but just purely speculating, I imagine that somehow, some way, that helps his case in him transferring to Tennessee and receiving immediate eligibility. So I agree with you, and it's a huge move because next year, all of a sudden, and assuming Trey Smith returns to school, you have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, maybe even one of the better ones in the entire country. And again, that's assuming Trey Smith returns for his senior year. That's assuming that Cade Mays receives immediate eligibility. But in that scenario, you would have one of the best offensive lines in the country. You would have a running back room that, assuming nobody transfers, you have Ty Chandler, you have Eric Gray, you have Tim Jordan, and you do add other bodies to that room as well. That's a good running back stable. I like Eric Gray going into next season as the bell cow, the guy who receives the touch when the game is on the line. Say what you will about Jared Garantano, but he's the second most experienced quarterback returning in the SEC behind Kellen Mond after Tua announces that he's gone to the NFL and after Jake Fromm announces that he has gone to the NFL. Yes, you lose Jawan Jennings and Marquez Callaway, but I like the potential of the wide receiver room when you consider D'Angelo Gibbs. He is at the level of Josh Palmer right now, and Josh Palmer is already a very good receiver. So you have a lot of talent on that offense. And assuming Cade Mays is immediately eligible, I think it takes it to the next step. And the next step for Tennessee is getting him eligible, and I think there's a really good chance of him being eligible.
How do you feel about the video things? Like I said, I understand Vol fans being upset about it at the time, and I understand Vol fans still kind of holding a little bit of, I wouldn't say resentment, but a little bit of hard feelings towards it, towards that video and towards what will happen. But like I said, I think a lot of the reaction was uncalled for, unwarranted. I think a lot of people have moved on from it and have forgiven him already, and did so even before Cooper Mays signed on with Tennessee. But I'm curious your thoughts, Ben. What do you feel, or how do you feel, I guess, about that video and Cade, potentially likely coming back to Knoxville after that incident a couple years ago?
I don't think it matters. It was a couple of years ago. Was it a good video? No, it was not. It's not something that any athlete should put out there, regardless of the school that they're going to, regardless of where they're from. In my opinion, and again, this is me speculating, but that video was made with some liquid courage in their system, some liquid drinks that make them feel a little bit better and say and do things that maybe they wouldn't ordinarily do. And that's no excuse. He should not have made the video and said what he said. And And for those who don't know, I mean, he said blank Tennessee as he was singing a song. I believe he was singing Dixieland Delight, the Alabama fight song, and he said blank Tennessee. So should he have said that? No. And even with the liquid courage in his system, he still takes responsibility for what he said. But at the end of the day, who cares? We're about winning football games at Tennessee right now. And, you know, of all the things that he could do, to me, that is not even on my radar anymore. It was frustrating at the time because, I mean, he was disrespecting Tennessee. But again, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because I imagine that he had some liquid courage in him. And obviously he doesn't truly feel that way about Tennessee because he's returning to Tennessee. He grew up a Tennessee fan. His dad played at Tennessee. His brother's at Tennessee. He doesn't feel that way towards Tennessee. I think at the time, because of, you know, the messages he was receiving from Tennessee fans, he probably did feel, you know, a certain type of way towards Tennessee. It would be hard not to. As an 18-year-old kid, you just signed to go play somewhere else because the school of your dreams had an imbecile at head coach, and that head coach, Butch Jones, wasn't going to help you advance your career to the next level the best way he could. Well, I mean, why would you come to Tennessee in that culture? And so because of the messages that I received from Tennessee fans disrespecting me because of my decision that was best for me and my family, I would feel a certain type of way towards Tennessee. And then you get to have that liquid courage in your system. And then, you know, you say things that you don't really mean. So I guess as a Tennessee fan, it doesn't matter to me, but ultimately I guess you can say I've forgiven him or whatnot, because I don't really think he feels that way.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And like I said, I understand people, Vol fans who, sorry, I just saw a really funny joke about people saying, you know, Kevin Mays' finger. Someone said since it's Georgia, everyone knew it wouldn't be Kevin Mays' ring finger that got amputated. So that was that was pretty funny. Anyway, Tennessee and Cade Mays is a very interesting. This is going to be something interesting to monitor, and it'll see, you know, when or if this gets announced by Tennessee here anytime soon. But Ben, that's not the only piece of I guess offensive lineman news for Tennessee that we've gotten today as of right now on January 8th, 2020. And that is that Trey Smith, you mentioned earlier, Trey Smith is going to make his announcement on whether or not he's going to come back to Tennessee or go to the NFL on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be there. You'll have full coverage. Ben, you'll be there. We'll have it video either live on Periscope or we'll have it up on YouTube. But we'll be there regardless and have tweets and stuff about it as well when it happens. But Trey Smith is going to be announcing whether or not he's coming back to Tennessee or going to go to the NFL. There seems to be some chatter now that, you know, I was expecting Trey Smith to probably go to the NFL, and especially after the bowl game, and kind of the way he was approaching, or the way he was, I guess, taking things at the end of the season, and the way he handled himself at the bowl game and everything. It seemed to me like it was going to be his last game at Tennessee, I guess, and just the way he was handling everything, it felt to me like he was going to be going on to the NFL. But now there seems to be, you know, a lot of chatter about, hey, there seems to be kind of positive news about him coming back to Tennessee for his senior season. That, to me, would be gigantic. That getting Trey Smith, I think, would be bigger than getting Cade Mays, but I think it's kind of a 1A, 1B situation. But y'all were talking on the Swain event, I think it was on Tuesday, saying that, you know, the biggest recruiting target left on Tennessee's board right now is Trey Smith, and I think Swain called him a 6-star, but he is the biggest recruiting target left on Tennessee's board right now, because getting him back, that solidifies that left guard spot. That lets you, you know, redshirt some guys. That lets you, you know, kind of wait another year before you have to replace Trey Smith. Plus, Trey Smith is fantastic. So I'm curious. Do you think Trey Smith's coming back? And what is your gut feeling on that? Or, you know, I almost think there's a better than 50-50 chance that he does come back to Tennessee at this point. And I didn't think that, you know, just a week ago or just 3 or 4 days ago either.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because you would think with his medical issues that he would just kind of say, okay, I've gotten to accomplish, or I've gotten to get back on track following the blood clots that he was dealing with. And what I mean by that is just him being able to play football again, at a high level, because if you remember, he was dealing with this issue heading into his sophomore season, and heading into his sophomore season, they figured out a plan for him. He was playing, but he wasn't playing like Trey Smith. He was playing poorly, quite frankly, and as we know, that is not Trey Smith-esque football. And ultimately, before the South Carolina game last season, the blood clots resurfaced, and he was not able to play the rest of his sophomore campaign. But this season, they find an efficient plan for him to where he doesn't really participate in practice full time, only had 2 full contact practices throughout the season, but that allowed him to play, and he played first round level worthy, in my opinion. He is absolutely worthy of a first round, second round pick, but because of the medical issues, an NFL team probably isn't going to invest that type of money into somebody who, unfortunately for Trey Smith, is just bad luck. But I mean, his blood clots could resurface at any point, and if they do, then that's a wasted investment for an NFL team from a business perspective. So you would think that, okay, he's somewhat turned a corner with the blood clots. It looks like that he's been able to put it in the rearview mirror, and he's playing great football. And you would think that, okay, he's got it in the bag. Just go ahead and go make some money now while you can. But I do think that NFL teams are questioning how efficient his plan can be at the NFL level with him not really practicing full time, at least full contact is what I should say. He's practicing. It's just he's not a full participant in full contact practices. And I think NFL teams are questioning that, because for young offensive linemen, it's critical that they go through full contact practices during preseason football. And if Trey Smith can't do that, then I think some NFL teams are worried that he won't develop at the pace that he should. So I think that Trey Smith sees an opportunity to come back and elevate his draft stock even more. Right now, personally, I think he's a mid-round pick at best. I think if Trey Smith comes back, proves that this plan can work, or even proves that he can get back to going through full contact practices and has another year like he did this year, I think he's a guaranteed first-round pick, assuming that he does pass the medical test there at the NFL Combine, and not even just the Combine, but throughout the entire draft process. If he gets the A-OK from the doctors after a second season, his senior season of just tremendous football, I think his stock would be through the absolute roof. So I think that's the mindset for Trey Smith moving forward. And I like Tennessee's chances of receiving good news on Thursday afternoon on campus.
Boy, man, I hope so. Can you imagine the type of 24 hours Tennessee would have if you have this report of getting Cade Mays, former 5-star, in your backyard, who the reason he didn't come to Tennessee in the first time is because of just how mishandled that recruitment got in the end of the Butch Jones era at Tennessee. Getting him to transfer back to Tennessee, or I guess come back to Knoxville, transfer to Tennessee, and then you also get to keep Trey Smith. That turns your offensive line from it wouldn't have been a weakness next season, but it would be more of a question mark. You'd have Brandon Kennedy returning, you would have Wanya Morris and Donna Wright coming back as starters, but you'd have questions at both guard spots, because the right guard spot never really got truly solidified this year because of injury, because of just inconsistent play. You obviously would be returning, guys like Jameer Johnson, K'Ron Calvert, Jerome Carvin, and whatnot. But this would bring back one full-time starter you had this past year in Trey Smith, and another guy in Cade Mays, who likely projects to be a full-time starter as long as he can adjust to everything and adjust to Tennessee's system fine, which you imagine with Jim Chaney and Will Friend, he would adjust just fine. But what a 24 hours and just a change in, having 2 big question marks on the offensive line next year to now suddenly that offensive line looks like it could be, I would say, the best in the SEC East, and possibly depending on, what Alabama does and LSU and those teams that have good offensive lines, depending on how they go out and everything, but potentially also being potentially the best offensive line in the SEC. That would be huge. And as you mentioned earlier, Garantano will be the most experienced or second most experienced returning quarterback in the SEC. Obviously, he's not guaranteed the starting job, but he's likely to get the starting job. You would also have Harrison Bailey back there, but whoever's going to be Tennessee's quarterback, you got to feel really good about pass protection. And I think this, maybe even more than pass protection, this really bolsters Tennessee's run game, because one issue Tennessee had this year in the run game was, Tennessee, the running backs did an okay job. They didn't do the greatest job of hitting holes and do the greatest job. And obviously, Tennessee didn't have a big power back, and that's why you saw them have a turn to Quavaris Crouch at the goal line and stuff. The offensive line wasn't consistent enough in their run blocking. If Tennessee wanted to get some run yards, they were going over to left side and running behind left guard, or Trey Smith left guard, and teams knew that because the right side wasn't getting the type of push that they were hoping for and that they needed consistently enough in the run game. You keep Trey Smith, you add Cade Mays. I think, and with another year in the strength conditioning program with Wanya Morris and Darnell Wright, and with Brandon Kennedy being the anchor in the center again, that could be a really, really, really good run blocking offensive line. And like I said, I think Tennessee could potentially have the best offensive line in the SEC next season if that all comes to plan.
For sure. We talked about it right off the top when we were talking about Cade Mays. I mean, you're going to be hard pressed to find a better offensive line that consists of Wanya Morris at left tackle, Trey Smith at left guard, Brandon Kennedy at center, Cade Mays at right guard, and Darnell Wright at right tackle. I mean, you expect that if Trey Smith returns, that he is going to just continue to maul folks at left guard, so that position's on lock. Brandon Kennedy did a great job of really putting Tennessee in advantageous situations in the run game with Jarrett Garantano. I know everybody likes to crap on Jarrett Garantano, but he is really good in getting Tennessee into the right run fits and making sure that they're not running into a loaded box or anything like that. He's really good in the run game and helping Tennessee, run the right plays. As simple as that sounds, he and Brandon Kennedy do a great job of communicating that, and Brandon Kennedy also does a great job of communicating amongst the offensive line and getting things sorted out. So he's a big piece, and Brandon Kennedy doesn't have the knockdown blocks that Trey Smith does, but he makes up for that and affects the game in other areas that don't really show up with the communication that I was just mentioning. So, Cade Mays, that's obviously an NFL talent. He'd be at right guard. And then your two freshman tackles were either a borderline 5-star or a 5-star, highly regarded coming out of high school. You expect them to take a ginormous step this offseason, especially Darnell Wright, because Darnell Wright didn't even have an all-season with Tennessee last year, at least the spring semester. Wanya Morris was an early enrollee. Darnell Wright was not. So now Darnell Wright gets an entire offseason in a college strength and conditioning program. He should take a huge step forward, as should Wanya Morris with another one under his belt. But even the thing that, makes me really positive about Tennessee's offensive line going into next season is if something goes wrong, if, I don't even really want to mention it, but if the worst happens and something happens with Trey Smith and medical issues resurface, then you can slide Cade Mays over to left guard, and then at right guard you can slide in a Jerome Carvin or Kayron Calvert, who got better as the season went along. Or if Cade Mays isn't immediately eligible, you still have Kayron Calvert and Jerome Carvin, which you can slide those two in at right guard, and then you still have Trey Smith at left guard. At left tackle, right tackle, if Darnell Wright, if Wanya Morris, if they can't take the next step, then you have Jameer Johnson you can slide in. You have Cade Mays that you can slide in. You could probably slide Trey Smith at tackle as well. So really even with center, if Brandon Kennedy were to get hurt again, I think people would automatically assume that that's Cooper Mays' job, and it might be, but you have Jerome Carvin that you can slide in there at center. So you're starting five. It has tremendous potential, but what I like about Tennessee's offensive line going into next year, and this is assuming that Tennessee doesn't suffer a ton of attrition at the position with Jameer Johnson and Calvert and Carvin, is you can slide those guys in there. And I haven't even talked about Riley Locklear either. He's another veteran presence there in the offensive line room. You have four guys behind the starting fives that has played for you, that is capable of being productive, and they are all versatile all of the linemen that I mentioned that are kind of reserves, Jameer Johnson, Riley Locklear, Calvert, and Carvin, they can all play multiple positions. Jerome Carvin can play center or either guard spot. Asking Riley Locklear, asking Kayron Calvert. Calvert can even kick out the tackle. And then you look at Jameer Johnson. Jameer Johnson can play either tackle position and he can play either guard position. So a very versatile offensive line that has depth, has experience, and has a ton of potential. And they'll be blocking for the second most experienced quarterback in the SEC, a stable of running backs that has a phenomenal talent in Eric Gray. And even aside from the phenomenal talent, Tim Jordan and Ty Chandler, they have talent, they have experience, assuming neither one of those two guys transfer. And then who knows if T. Hodge or Lenith Whitehead or Jabari Small or Carlin Fields and me can have an impact at that position. You still have Austin Pope. Austin Pope may not be the pass catcher that Tennessee has had in recent years at the tight end position, but he's a tremendous blocker, and he's kind of an additional offensive lineman. And I do think that he is capable of catching passes. You saw Austin Pope be a real good pass catcher coming out of high school when he was at CAK. I mean, he was essentially recruited as a wide receiver, right, and now he's turned in to a tight end. So each position is locked down, even the wide receiver room. I talked about it earlier. You have D'Angelo Gibbs, who I think is going to be a stud for Tennessee. You have Josh Palmer, who's an NFL receiver. Ramel Keaton took a step this year. Cedric Tillman took a step this year. What if Jalen Hyatt comes in and is ready to play right away? What if Jimmy Callaway is ready to play right away? What if Tennessee lands Jakari Caldwell and he's ready to play right away? You have Brandon Johnson, who redshirted this year as a senior. He has experience. He can be a leader for the offense. He's the guy that led the team in catches 2 years ago. So all of a sudden, if Tennessee can find consistent quarterback play, and I realize that that's a huge question, and a lot of people are out on Jarrett Garantano, but if Jarrett Garantano can find consistent quarterback play, or if Brian Maurer can take the next step, or if Harrison Bailey is ready to play from day one, I mean, this offense has the potential to be good, led by that offensive line. Trey Smith returning, Cade Mays becoming immediate eligible would be absolutely huge for this football team.
Yeah, this is all going to be worth monitoring. We'll obviously, like I said, we'll have full coverage for you on Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern of Trey Smith's press conference, and Jeremy Pruitt is expected to be there in attendance as well. But that's not even the only, talking about Cade Mays, that's not even the only transfer news that Tennessee got on Wednesday. We had it at first reported by our recruiting partners here at RTI over at VR2. We'll be doing an RTI and VR2 recruiting podcast tonight with them as well, so be on the lookout for that if you're listening to this podcast. But VR2 first had the news and then ended up getting confirmed later on, I think by 247 and VolQuest as well. But Tennessee is adding a transfer wide receiver to their roster, and that is Miles Jones from Nebraska. He came in as a pretty high 3-star top guy. I think is a 4-star by Rivals and a close to top 500 player on the 247 Sports Composite rankings out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Played for American Heritage down there. As a senior, he's actually coached by Patrick Surtain, former NFL player, former All-Pro defensive back, as the head coach down there. As a senior, he led the team in kickoff and punt return yards and all-purpose yards. He had just under 700 rushing yards and over 400 receiving yards, 14 total offensive touchdowns, and had 2 kick return touchdowns as an all-purpose guy. He's about 5'8", 175 from Nebraska. Played in one game as a true freshman, caught a pass for 21 yards, had a run for 5 yards. Then he suffered a season-ending injury. He appeared in 4 games for Nebraska this past season, but he did not record any stats. So he had a medical red shirt for his first year, a regular red shirt for this year. Is expected that he's going to, I think, be a walk-on potentially for Tennessee this upcoming season, but it is expected that he's going to have to sit out for this season and be a 2021 guy. But I think there's a report saying that he's going to at least apply for immediate eligibility and see if he can get it. I think the chances like that with like D'Angelo Gibbs are pretty low, but you don't have, like with D'Angelo Gibbs, you don't have a guy transferring further away from home, a guy transferring within the conference. It's a guy who's transferring a lot closer to home. Nebraska is a lot further from Florida than Tennessee, and Nebraska and Tennessee aren't in the same conference, not scheduled to play each other anytime in the near future or anything like that. So I don't know that he'll get to play next season. Even if he doesn't, to me, I think this is a pretty good pickup. It's a guy who, he's not as speedy as a Jalen Hyatt, not as speedy as a Jimmy Callaway, or potentially Jimmy Holiday if he moves to the wide receiver room. But this is a good move for Tennessee's future at wide receiver. He's a guy to me that is watching his film reminds me a little bit, not to the, it's I guess mostly just because of their size and kind of how they play the position and stuff, but he was kind of an all-purpose back in high school. But it reminds me a little bit of what Pig Howard was coming out of high school. That smaller guy who is probably a little bit tougher to bring down than you'd expect from him being smaller. But I like the potential he brings, but he's a guy that I think bringing him in for the 2021 cycle, if he doesn't play for next season, which I don't think he will, but bring him in for 2021, I think it's a good move because this year you're obviously losing Jennings, you're losing Callaway, you're losing Tyler Bird. Next year you're going to be losing Palmer, and you're going to be losing Brandon Johnston, as you mentioned earlier, Big, because he's redshirting and he'll be available for next season. And then you'll have Cedric Tillman, who will be a junior. No, he'll be a senior in 2021. You'll have Ramel Keaton, who will be a junior in 2021. And if things go well with him, he could potentially declare early that year. I think it's a good move to bring someone in here that's not just a grad transfer that's going to help you this year, but he's a guy who gives you at least 2 years of eligibility whenever he gets eligible to play. I haven't seen a whole lot of him in college. He's been on the field 5 times technically, and only recorded stats in 1 game. So don't really know what exactly he brings to you as a collegiate player. But if Tennessee's willing to take a flyer on him, I like this move. I think this is a good move to bolster your wide receiver depth in the future.
Yeah, you're a little more optimistic on the move than I am. I don't know that I would use a scholarship on him if I'm Jeremy Pruitt in this staff, only because of his size. 5'8", 175 pounds. And I'm not saying that he can't be effective, but we don't see very many 5'8" wide receivers, even in the slot, be effective. And you mentioned it. I mean, he plays more than just wide receiver. At least he did in high school. You mentioned it here on the article on RTI that as a senior, he led the team in kickoff return yards, punt return yards, all-purpose yards, and was just really all over the place for American Heritage down in Fort Lauderdale in high school. So he is a guy that can do multiple things. But as a pure wide receiver, personally, I hope that Tennessee does not use a scholarship on him. I would rather see Tennessee go out and find the body types of Jimmy Callaway, of Jakari Caldwell, those type of guys, 6'2", 6'3", 200 pounds, somewhere in there. Not saying that has to be like that, but I'm just not going to put a whole lot of stock into somebody who's 5'8". But what I like about this addition is it's like Kasim Hill.
Yeah.
I mean, even though Kasim Hill, may not even factor into the quarterback rotation, you added a quarterback who has played significant football at a Power 5 school, at a Big Ten school, started for them, made plays for them. You got him for free. And if Miles Jones is a walk-on, you're getting somebody who was, a borderline top 500 player coming out of high school, had offers from Mississippi State, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Wisconsin, obviously Nebraska, was a part of Nebraska's 2018 signing class. So obviously multiple coaches have seen something in him. You're getting him for free. And anytime you can add somebody with that type of natural talent that other coaches see in him as well for free, and you don't have to use a scholarship on him, I mean, I think it's a great addition because you just never know what he may turn into be. And again, although I'm kind of bullish on him because of his size, that doesn't mean that he's just not going to have an impact. I mean, he may turn in to be a great slot player for Tennessee, but I do hope that Tennessee does not use a scholarship on him just because I do think that maybe you just need to have him prove something to you in person before you do just that.
And I get it. His height is the biggest detriment for him, and the fact that he's not I guess he's not like I said, he's not a Jimmy Callaway or a Jalen Hyatt type of speed, but he's still quick enough. And like I said, he's a good special teams player. For reference, Pig Howard was essentially the exact same height weight. He's 5'8", 187. So I mean, and like I said, that was that feels like forever ago. It was only 5 years ago, but man, that feels like forever ago when Pig Howard was last on the roster for Tennessee. But I'm trying to pull up his stats. He ended up with being a pretty good career, and obviously you remember back in that 2013 season for Tennessee, and I think 2014 as well. It seemed like, especially in 2013, that's right, he was hurt in 2015, or he got kicked off the team. Something happened. Yeah, he got He suspended for a violation of team rules, and I think he got kicked off the team, maybe, if I remember that correctly. Anyway, Big Howard, if you remember in 2013, he was kind of the guy who would send on jet sweeps. In 2014, he was one of the main guys on offense. Obviously, at that point, you had Jalen Hurd and whatnot, but he finished his Tennessee career, I think, with 99 catches, over 1,000 yards in his career, 35 rushes, 200-plus yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 overall touchdowns on offense. That's good. That's good. He's not. I'm not expecting Miles Jones to be a guy who comes in, and I know you're not either, Ben, but I'm not expecting him to come in and be a guy that makes a huge difference in the receiving core. But I think he would add a good depth and add kind of a nice, really, to me, if nothing else, a good special teams player. And Tennessee hasn't had a whole lot of dynamic return, or I guess any dynamicism in the kickoff return game since Evan Berry graduated. I know you had Ty Chandler, I think, return 1 kickoff for a touchdown, but it was against one of Tennessee's lesser opponents. I think it was an FCS school he did it against, or Indiana State maybe. But you've talked about it before, if not on this podcast, on the Swing event, talking about Ty Chandler having issues kick returning this year. He had that one good, the 47-yarder against Indiana in the bowl game, but he also had that one this past season where he didn't know the rule. And granted, it was a weird rule, but he didn't know the rule and kneeled down when he wasn't supposed to, and it set Tennessee back, essentially out their goal line when he thought he was kneeling it down, and give him a fair catch to give the ball up to 25 or 30, wherever it is when they do that. But I'm going to be intrigued to see what he does. Like you said, it's like with Kasim Hill. If he's a walk-on, it's a free guy you're getting. You're not taking up a spot. You have a chance to still go out and get, maybe a Velus Jones Jr., who we've not talked about on the podcast because we haven't done a podcast since he's come back up, but he's a guy transferring from USC, and he's been linked to Tennessee a little bit. And I think Trey Wallace of Read Optional has reported that Velus Jones said that the coaches have told him that if he wants in, that they have a spot for him at Tennessee. He's a guy who would be able to play immediately. I think he's a grad transfer, but I don't know, Ben. We've got a lot of transfer news. You get the news. I guess kind of last thing I want to close with here, speaking of transfers and stuff, is the news of Joe Doyle, Tennessee's redshirt sophomore punter, who I believe is still a walk-on. I don't think he got a scholarship. He put his name in the transfer portal, released a statement on Tuesday night as Tennessee was playing basketball and as the men's team beat Missouri on the road. Put a statement out there saying that he appreciates everyone, that it was a difficult decision for him to make because he grew up in Knoxville, he went to Farragut. He was a freshman All-American, according to USA Today's Sports, in 2018 for Tennessee. But this year he lost his starting job. I mean, he started the season as the main punter, kind of split a little bit with Paxton Brooks, but then he just wasn't impressive, had a really lackluster performance against Alabama, and then I don't think he punted in a single game after that. Move didn't surprise me, but does it surprise you, Ben, because of the fact that he's a local kid and that he is, he grew up a Vol fan?
It surprised me because of the timing. I figured that this would be a move that was made maybe after spring practice because, Paxton Brooks kind of took over his job towards the second half of the season, throughout the second half of the season. But if you look at their stats, they are very similar. I believe Paxton Brooks averaged 42 yards per punt, and Joe Doyle averaged 41 yards per punt, so only a yard difference. So I'm surprised that he didn't stick around through spring practice, see where things stood after spring practice, and then made the decision. And technically, he can still withdraw his name from the transfer portal at some point. So maybe that is the case. But I'm not surprised that one of Tennessee's punters is transferring, but I guess I would be surprised that it is Joe Doyle just because of the timing and just because he is a Knoxville kid, although I completely understand him wanting to play college football. He gets one crack at playing college football, and it's kind of like Ryan Johnson. Yes, it kind of stinks that you don't get to do it at the school that you grew up loving and having a passion for. But, again, you get one opportunity to play college football, an opportunity that most people don't get. And if you're not playing, you should absolutely look to play or look to transfer somewhere where you can play.
By the way, as we're ending the podcast here, Big Howard was dismissed from Tennessee's football team. I thought I remembered that correctly, but he was dismissed. I don't think he was a guy that was getting a shot in the whatever that one that football league that got canned. He was getting a shot there. He'd kind of gotten a cup of coffee here and there in the NFL, I think with the Bears and maybe a couple teams, but that was a couple years ago. He's been kind of bouncing around, I think, looking for places to play professionally that aren't in the NFL, but he's a guy, like I said, that I think Miles Jones reminds me of. And I'm with you. It doesn't surprise me that Joe Doyle transferred or is going to transfer. Like you said, he still can come back, but he issued that statement. I don't think he's going to come back. I thought it would be him if you're going to have one transfer, because Paxton Brooks also did kickoffs and did a decent job this year kickoffs. He had some times where not the greatest kicks, but that obviously that onside kick he had perfectly executed. But I figured if there's going to be one guy transferring, it was going to be Joe Doyle. And I think you're going to see a few more guys transfer off the roster between now and the end of spring practices, maybe even before spring practices begin, because they will begin kind of, I guess, early to mid-March is usually when they start for Tennessee. I know Vanderbilt's one of those schools that starts it really early, and they I think their spring games usually before a lot of teams are halfway done with their spring practices. So, but Tennessee usually starts on kind of early mid March, and kind of you have a kind of halfway point sometimes is the spring break for Tennessee or at UT. But I think you're going to see, I don't think you're going to see a mass exodus or anything like that, but I think you'll see 2 or 3 more other guys transfer off the roster between now and the end of spring practices. Like I said, maybe even before spring practices begin. But Ben, we had a lot more I want to talk about, and we'll talk about it in a different podcast maybe later this week as well. But basketball's talk with Santiago Vescovi debuting and having a pretty good start to his Tennessee career. Some more recap and stuff from Tennessee's 2019 season, but no chance to get to all that because of all this news that dropped on us here in the last 24 hours for Tennessee, and some more news will be happening in the next 24 hours. So we'll have full coverage, like I said, of Trey Smith and his press conference at 1 o'clock Eastern on Thursday, January 9th. So be sure to be looking out for that. Like I said, we'll either do Periscope or YouTube video of it later on. But either way, we'll have full video of it and everything he has to say, everything Jeremy Pruitt has to say as well. Signing off for Ben McKee, I am Nathaniel Rutherford, and this has been another episode of the RTI Podcast.